of fact. We blend up frozen bananas, some other frozen fruit, maybe it's peaches or strawberries or mango, a little vanilla, like a teaspoon of vanilla, enough soy milk or nut milk to blend it all. Blend it all up. You can have it in cones. We use our Vitamix for this, so it's quite thick. And we can have it in cones, and it's so good. Anyway, coming from an ice cream family, I guess you'd expect I'd be enthused about that. So as we go through the finale, I want to invite you to regularly refresh the comments on the page and post your thoughts and reactions. Today's topic is wisdom, courage, and truth in the time of COVID-19. In a few moments, I will be joined by my dad and colleague, John Robbins. This finale presentation will go for about an hour. We'll begin in a moment, but first a word about the Food Revolution Network mission. At Food Revolution Network, our mission is healthy, ethical, and sustainable food for everyone who eats. We want kids to learn about healthy food in school. We want doctors to learn how nutrition impacts health in medical school. We want the routine use of antibiotics banned from factory farms. We want a world where everyone, regardless of their ethnic or economic background, has knowledge of and access to healthy food for their family. We want a world in which heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, obesity, and diabetes are rare, and in which vibrant health is the status quo. We're spreading the word and standing for change. And with every empowerment package purchased, we make a donation to Trees for the Future, enabling them to plant an organic fruit or nut tree in a low-income community. Join this movement and support this mission. Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and your world with food. This is Ocean Robbins, and I'm here now with my dad and colleague, John Robbins. For the last 8 days, you've been hearing him interviewing some of the top food experts on the planet. And now on this final day of our summit, here we are. And I want to begin this final presentation with my profound gratitude to you. I'm so grateful that you're here and that you've chosen to make learning about food and health and being part of the food revolution into a priority in your life, especially at this moment in history with so much disruption of our normal lives and so much uncertainty in the world. At a time when your health is more important than ever before, your trust and your participation mean the world to me. From my heart to your heart, thank you. I'm also grateful that I get to be here now and to work with one of my greatest heroes and dearest friends in all the world, my dad and colleague, John Robbins. He's an inspiration to millions, and his books and work have helped to change the course of food history. He's the multi-million copy best-selling author of A Diet for a New America and The Food Revolution. He's co-founder and president of Food Revolution Network. He's inspired millions of people to make food choices that contribute to health, compassion, and integrity. And he's received dozens of awards for his decades of leadership and service. Hopefully, during the course of this summit, through his skillful interviews and the remarkable dialogues he's brought forward with our speakers, hopefully you've gotten a chance to see something of how wise and insightful this man is. But one thing you haven't gotten to see is what an amazing dad he is. Working with him and sharing so much of my life with him is one of my greatest privileges.
Well, thank you, Ocean. Thank you so much. Working with you and sharing my life with you is one of my greatest privileges, too, and one of my greatest joys, I would add, as well.
Thank you.
And for those of our participants who may not know, let me share a little bit about my son and colleague, Ocean Robbins. I'm very proud of him, of course. But, more than proud, I'm in awe a little bit. I'm inspired by him. I'm led by him often, taught by him often. And you've gotten to know him a bit through the summit, through his wonderful presence and the many insights he's brought to the summit. So you may already have a sense of what a loving and what a wise man he is. And he has credentials too. Ocean is co-founder and CEO of Food Revolution Network. As a teen, he founded Youth for Environmental Sanity, or YES, which is a global youth leadership nonprofit that he directed for 20 years. He's served as adjunct professor for Chapman University, and he's the author of the bestseller 31-Day Food Revolution. And working with Ocean is something I just cherish.
Thank you for those kind words. And now, how would you like to begin?
Well, I want to begin by offering my love and compassion to all the people who are suffering terribly from the outbreak of this coronavirus all over the world. We have people listening to us right now in 150 countries. And I know that each and every one of us has been impacted intensely by COVID-19. My heart is with all who are sick, and it's with all who have lost loved ones or fear they might. My heart is with all the doctors and the nurses and the other medical personnel who are working so very hard, and in many cases under terribly difficult conditions to save lives. And my heart is also with all who are experiencing financial distress, whose lives are being brutalized by the economic dominoes that are falling so hard on so many good people everywhere. And my heart is with all of those who have been marginalized by our society, who are suffering intensely from this pandemic. People of color, Native and Indigenous people, immigrants, prisoners, the homeless, and people in assisted living and nursing facilities, to name just a few. Someone once said that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. My hope is that this summit has given you tools to help you through some of the challenges you're facing. And my intention is that our conversation today, this summit finale, will inform and inspire you about what you can do to live with more health and more hope and more love in this time of global pandemic.
Yes, beautiful. I want that too. Based on what we know so far, it seems that about 1 in 6 people who have tested positive for the coronavirus that causes COVID-19 have experienced severe symptoms that result typically in hospitalization. But some people, perhaps even most people, get what feels more like a really bad flu. And some, it turns out, aren't even aware that they've gotten sick at all. They stay healthy and symptom-free. How many asymptomatic carriers there are is a matter of hot debate. We really don't know yet. Estimates range from 25% to as high as 95% of all cases. Whatever that number turns out to be, it's very important to remember that even asymptomatic people can spread this virus to others for whom it could become life-threatening.
Yes, that is very important for all of us to bear in mind. And a question that's on a lot of people's minds today is, why doesn't this coronavirus impact everyone in the same way?
Yes, that is a very important question. We've still got a lot to learn about this virus, but we do know that your underlying level of health has a profound impact on how your body responds to any infection. We also know that heart disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and other chronic illnesses are all major risk factors for the most serious COVID-19 outcomes. And as we've seen throughout this summit, most of the major chronic diseases of our times are profoundly impacted by your diet and lifestyle. And this definitely includes the specific diseases that are the major risk factors for death from COVID-19. We know that a whole foods, plant-strong diet, along with a few other simple lifestyle practices like not smoking and getting regular exercise, can prevent more than 80% of all heart disease, more than 85% of all hypertension, and more than 90% of type 2 diabetes. I know that if you or anyone you love is facing any of these conditions right now, then that can make COVID-19 all the more scary. But the good news is there are choices you can make today that can slash your risk of the chronic diseases that are such serious risk factors. And while it can take decades for some of these conditions to develop, you can begin to turn many of them around in a matter of weeks.
That's really important because we can do something about these conditions. We can do something about it in the short term. We can do something about it right away.
Yes.
In Italy, 99% of the fatalities have occurred in people with pre-existing medical conditions. 99%. And then in April, the CDC published a report saying that 94% of all the people who had died from the virus in the US thus far had an underlying chronic medical condition, like one of the ones you mentioned. It's now indisputable that if our population was healthier, if the prevailing diet was a whole foods, plant-strong diet, if people were eating beans instead of beef and vegetables instead of processed junk foods and far less sugar, if we weren't compromising our immune systems with poor dietary choices, the death toll from COVID-19 would be far lower than what we are now experiencing.
It would. COVID-19 affects people of every economic class, every age, and every ethnic background. But it impacts some communities more than others. In the United States, it's estimated that compared to a white person, an African American is more than twice as likely to die of COVID-19. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, before I answer that question, I just want to say how sad it is that that is the case.
Yes.
People of color have so much higher rates of the chronic diseases that are such serious risk factors for dying from this virus. For example, Black people have a 77% higher risk of diabetes and are 51% more likely to be obese. And for Hispanics, it's similar. This is in large measure because the foods available and affordable in Black and brown communities tend to be mostly highly processed junk foods. And since people of color more often live in areas with polluted air, they also tend to have more asthma and other lung diseases, and all of this makes people more vulnerable to COVID-19. Painfully, communities of color also typically have less preventative care, less access to care, and lower quality care. And I say this is painful to me. I don't understand how it couldn't be painful that it exists for all of us. I actually find it outrageous that our health depends so much on our zip code, our economic status, and on the color of our skin. Our healthcare system and our public policies need urgently to change so that all of us have the ability to access and to afford healthy food, so that all of us have clean air to breathe, and so that all of us have access to treatments that are effective for our unique needs. I think it's a crime that this is not already the case.
Yeah, I agree with you about that. Another group of people that's uniquely at risk from COVID-19 is older people. Why is it that older people are at such greater risk of dying than younger people?
Well, it's partly because older people have more of the underlying medical conditions that we've been talking about. And another reason deaths from COVID-19 are much more common in older people is that as we age, our immune function tends to decline. This is called immune senescence. Now, Western medicine tends to think of immune senescence as an inevitable consequence of growing older. But more and more scientists have been questioning this thinking and wondering whether the decline could be more a product of unhealthy eating. And I'm thinking, for example, of a study. It was a randomized controlled trial. It was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And it was titled, Effect of Fruit and Vegetable Consumption on Immune Function in Older People. The study was designed to find out whether eating more fruits and vegetables might preserve a healthy immune system even as we age, might delay or even prevent immune senescence.
Well, what did the researchers find?
Okay, the study participants were all between the ages of 65 and 85, and they were all exposed to a viral pathogen. And then they were studied, and the researchers found that for people in this age group, those who had been eating 5 or more servings of fruits and vegetables a day had an 82% better immune response compared to those who had been eating fewer than 3 daily servings of fruits and vegetables. Now this, And many other studies suggest strongly that immune senescence does not occur nearly as much in people who are eating lots of fruits and vegetables. And now, Ocean, I know that you've recently been studying the fruits and vegetables that have been found to be particularly helpful in optimizing immune function. Can you tell us a bit about what you've learned?
Sure, I'd love to. But first, I do want to say that we're dealing here with a virus that's new to humans. So we have a lot of information about which foods are beneficial in fighting influenza, colds, and other viral infections, and in supporting immune health in general. And it stands to reason that these same foods would be especially helpful in the time of COVID-19. But there is a lot we don't know about this specific virus, and research on it is just beginning. So with all that said, there are some foods that have been shown to be pretty fabulous for immune health. You could start with greens like spinach, kale, mustard greens, collard greens, broccoli, bok choy, and Brussels sprouts. They're all packed with the phytonutrients that your immune system needs for optimal function. Green vegetables are rich in folate, which is especially important for producing antibodies that work to destroy antigens that can make you sick. They're also high in many antioxidants that are great for your immune health.
That's wonderful. And, you mentioned broccoli a moment ago. I'm remembering something that Jerry Seinfeld once said. He said that he wouldn't eat broccoli if it was deep fried in chocolate sauce. A lot of people turn their noses up at broccoli. They don't like the taste. They don't like the smell. Whatever it is, it's too bad, because broccoli does have so much to recommend it. And I'm sure we've all heard that broccoli is really healthy. But there are very good reasons for that. And I want to mention a few of them. Broccoli is packed with antioxidants. It helps prevent cancer. It provides healthy fiber that cleanses your intestines. It keeps your skin young and glowing. It helps maintain healthy arteries and protects your eyes. And perhaps most importantly today, it is antiviral.
When you say it's antiviral, what do you mean by that? And what do the studies tell us about it?
Well, those are good questions. Researchers published a study in the journal Cell that found that broccoli optimizes immune system function in the face of viral infections. Now, how did they come to that conclusion? Specifically, they found that a diet low in broccoli caused a decrease in the number of protective cells in the immune system called intraepithelial lymphocytes. Now, you don't need to remember the name of these cells, but what's important to know is that they constitute a critical part of your body's ability to ward off viruses and other pathogens. When the number of intraepithelial lymphocytes declines, the likelihood of viral infection increases. And the researchers found that the number of intraepithelial lymphocytes increases, that's good, with the consumption of cruciferous veggies, which include kale and cabbage and arugula and collards and the other vegetables in that family. And they found that was particularly so, I'm sorry to say this for you, Jerry Seinfeld, with consumption of broccoli.
Well, hooray for broccoli. And another family of veggies is the allium family. It includes onions, shallots, scallions, leeks, garlic, and chives. The alliums are rich in organosulfur compounds that have major benefits for immunity. Onions contain quercetin, a compound that may have particularly powerful bacteria-fighting abilities, and they're also rich in a prebiotic fiber that feeds the beneficial bacteria in your large intestine.
Well then, hooray for onions.
Yes, and all the alliums.
And all the alliums, yes. What about mushrooms?
Oh, mushrooms. Fungi are fantastic. Mushrooms are incredible for your health. They really are. There are a lot of different kinds of mushrooms. Almost all of them are linked to a smarter immune system. And I'm not just talking here about exotic varieties. I'm even talking about common ones like white mushrooms, button mushrooms, and portobello mushrooms. Also, let's not forget about seeds and nuts like chia seeds, flax seeds, walnuts, and almonds. They are also rich in disease-preventing nutrients. They're loaded with fiber, with healthy omega-3 fats, and with micronutrients like vitamin E, iron, calcium, and zinc. Zinc, by the way, is a particularly potent nutrient that supports immunity, so much so that it's sometimes called a gatekeeper of immune function.
Some hospitals today are actually experimenting with using zinc as a treatment for COVID-19. The results so far have been mixed. There are indications that it can help in some cases, but not all. But certainly making sure you have adequate amounts of zinc in your diet, and maybe today taking a supplement, makes a lot of sense to me. Ocean, what are the other veggies that we should be eating lots of today?
Oh my goodness, there are so many of them. Red and purple vegetables like beets and purple cauliflower, purple carrots, red onions, eggplant, and purple cabbage are particularly important right now because they're loaded with antioxidants called anthocyanins. That's what gives them their coloring, and it helps to heal your cells from damage. Anthocyanins may also help prevent cancer, promote heart health, and boost your memory. Red grapes and many kinds of berries, including blueberries and raspberries, are also fabulous sources of these powerful immune-enhancing nutrients.
Well, hooray for berries.
Yes.
Berries have long been touted for their many health benefits, including anti-cancer properties, including their ability to reduce and repair damage caused by oxidative stress and by inflammation. And they do all that, and they do all that very well. But one of the things about berries that I find highly significant today is they also have an uncanny ability to boost your levels of what are called natural killer cells.
What are natural killer cells, and why is it good to boost their levels?
Great questions. Okay, natural killer cells are a type of white blood cell, and that these play a pivotal role in your immune system. And in particular, natural killer cells play a major role in your body's ability to destroy viruses that your body has never seen before.
I can't help thinking that natural killer cells sounds like something out of a 90s Woody Harrelson movie. Why are they called that?
Well, not because they were in that movie, but because they don't require prior exposure to a virus in order to recognize it and kill it. You see, most other parts of the immune system can only respond effectively to a virus after they've had a history of exposure. Once you've had chickenpox, for example, you usually become immune to catching it again. But you depend on natural killer cells to ward off viral infections that you haven't had before. And one of the reasons the current global pandemic is creating so much havoc today is that no human being has ever had the disease that produces COVID-19 before now.
So berries are particularly helpful right now because they support the production of these natural killer cells.
Right.
Is there science to back that up?
Well, yes, there certainly is. I'm remembering, for example, a study that was designed to measure, among other things, the effect of eating blueberries on natural killer cell counts. It was a very sophisticated study, and it looked at the effect of blueberry consumption on a lot of things, including on oxidative stress and cortisol and homocysteine and leukocytes and T cell function, the whole array of immune system attributes and natural killer cell counts. And the study found that under conditions that cut the number of these important immune cells in half, regular blueberry consumption actually doubled the natural killer cell counts. And by the way, the researchers in other studies have found that the aromatic spice cardamom can supercharge the ability of your natural killer cells to do what they do best, which is to protect you from viruses your body has never encountered before.
It's sounding like we should all be eating blueberries sprinkled with cardamom powder.
Well, it wouldn't be a bad idea, but I'm not saying, of course, that eating kale and broccoli and blueberries sprinkled with cardamom powder will cure COVID-19. But I am saying, and this is heavily supported in the scientific literature, that the healthier your immune system is, the better you will fare if you do become infected. And a diet that's rich in vegetables and fruits, and particularly the ones like kale and broccoli and berries and mushrooms that we've been talking about, will enhance the ability of your immune system to function at its best.
Is there any one particular nutrient that you think we should all pay attention to right now?
Yes, if I were going to name one nutrient that we should be paying more attention to right now, it would be vitamin D. And I say that for two reasons. One is because vitamin D deficiency is very common, and because vitamin D deficiency leads to an increased susceptibility to viral respiratory infections. And that's why the former CDC director, Dr. Tom Frieden, recently said that taking vitamin D supplements reduces the risk of respiratory infection and also regulates cytokine production. And this is critically important today because COVID-19 infections are notorious for producing cytokine storms. And when that happens, the risk of death from COVID-19 is greatly increased.
Yes, it's true. So what should your vitamin D levels be?
There is strong evidence that vitamin D blood levels of 50 nanograms per milliliter are needed to protect against viral respiratory infection. That's 50 nanograms per milliliter. And supplementing with 2,000 IUs or more per day of D3 may be necessary to reach those levels, especially in the winter.
You said that the evidence here is strong. Can you give us an example?
Yes, I did, and I can. I'm thinking of a meta-analysis of 25 randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. This is the gold standard. That was published. The meta-analysis was published in the British Medical Journal, a very prestigious, peer-reviewed journal. The study found that vitamin D supplementation protects against acute respiratory tract infections, especially the ones that are caused by viruses. And one thing that I found particularly striking is that the review concluded that people who have optimal vitamin D levels, who take supplemental vitamin D during the winter, may actually have lower rates of flu than people who receive flu vaccines. And the researchers concluded that vitamin D supplementation reduces the risk of acute respiratory infections among all the participants in all the studies they looked at. And now that's, to me, pretty strong evidence. And yet, to be clear, we don't have any data yet specifically on vitamin D and COVID-19. But since vitamin D is so very helpful against influenza and against other respiratory infections caused by viruses that we are familiar with, it seems very likely that it would be helpful with COVID-19 too.
Yes, absolutely. And again, we're talking about the possibility of supplementation or getting enough sunshine, but a blood level test can be a great way to know where you actually stand so you can take appropriate action here. Shifting focus a little bit, a lot of people today are concerned about the possible contamination of fresh produce. They're aware that other people have handled the broccoli, the carrots, the kale, the other veggies and fruits that they might bring home from the market. And at Food Revolution Network, we've recommended soaking non-organic fresh produce in a baking soda solution for 15 minutes. Basically, you add a tablespoon of baking soda per gallon of water. And this has been found to help remove most pesticide residues. But today, a lot of people are afraid to continue eating their fresh fruits and veggies, particularly because these foods need to be refrigerated to stay fresh. And it turns out that this virus can live longer in a refrigerator or freezer than it can at room temperature. Do you have an answer for this?
I think so. There is a lot yet to be learned about this new coronavirus. There just is. But right now, the USDA states that it is not aware of any reports that even suggest COVID-19 can be transmitted by food or food packaging.
Really?
And likewise, the FDA currently states that there is no evidence to support the transmission of COVID-19 associated with food or food packaging. Now, the fact that these agencies aren't aware of any such cases doesn't mean that there aren't any.
Possible.
It means that they haven't found any. Whether they're looking or how hard they're looking, I don't know. But I think it's more important now than ever to strictly follow good hygiene practices. And this means washing your hands and your kitchen surfaces often with soap and water.
What about washing fruits and vegetables?
Well, in my household, we wash all our fruits and vegetables, and we do so thoroughly using running water. We don't use soap. We don't use any other disinfectants when we're washing food. And with any produce that will be eaten raw, before we do the washing with running water, we soak the produce in a solution of water and baking soda, as you described a moment ago.
Why do you do that if it's organic?
Well, in this case, it's not to get rid of pesticide residues. In this case, it's to create a highly alkaline environment. And this coronavirus doesn't seem to remain viable in highly alkaline environments. So then we rinse the produce well to get rid of the baking soda taste. But the baking soda bath isn't necessary with foods that will be cooked, because this coronavirus is killed by cooking.
Can we get sick from this coronavirus from touching food or food packaging or food contact surfaces?
Well, as I mentioned a moment ago, according to statements from the USDA and also the CDC and the FDA, they're all saying there's no evidence at this time of food or food packaging being associated with the transmission of COVID-19. But since it is possible for the virus to survive on surfaces and objects, you should be sure to frequently wash your hands and to avoid touching your face and mouth when handling food products that come from a store or a restaurant. And I think it's also a good practice to carefully discard the packaging that a food came in to avoid any possibility of contamination from handling by people who might have the virus. And I'm sorry to keep saying this, but it is really, really important to keep washing your hands with soap and water.
Yes, we've all been hearing a lot about that, and for good reason. Now, what about takeout foods or delivery from restaurants?
If you're able to prepare more of your foods at home, so much the better. But food from your local restaurants is still generally considered a safe option, especially if you can opt for contactless delivery options or pickups. In our household, we always transfer food to our own servingware, and we always get rid of the packaging. And of course, we wash our hands thoroughly before eating. And if your takeout is cooked food, then it might be a good idea to reheat it thoroughly in order to destroy any possible contamination.
Since COVID-19 hit, food security has become a major concern for a lot of people. Many people who've been living paycheck to paycheck are now finding themselves without any paychecks. Suddenly, tens of millions of people have been thrust into fear of or are facing the actual reality of hunger. On top of this, panic buying has led to a lot of store shelves being empty, and now we've got disruptions to long supply chains, which are impacting our ability to access more and more products.
Yeah, this is happening, and it's a scary time for just about everybody, and it is a terrifying time for some people.
Yeah, it really is. Now, one constructive step that a lot of people are taking, if they can, is to connect with local farmers. CSAs, or Community Supported Agriculture programs, enable farmers to sell directly to consumers without all the middle people who normally take a cut. When you join in a CSA program, you get a share of a farm's harvest. This gives them a guaranteed market and a fair price, and it gives you direct access to healthy and locally grown food. Local food has a lot of advantages, including freshness and supporting a local economy, and now we have to say that food security is a big one as well. Now, this is also a great time to get even more local than that by planting seeds. Growing your own food can make you more self-sufficient. It can give you a feeling of control in a world in which so much is out of our control. And the truth is that people who grow more vegetables also tend to eat more vegetables. And eating more vegetables is one of the best health insurance policies you could ever hope to find.
It really is. And when people grow their own vegetables, they do eat them, and they like them, and they enjoy them, and they connect to the earth and the fertility of the earth and the soil in ways that are good for our souls, are good for our emotional health and mental health, and help to release stress. There's a lot of things to say on that behalf.
Absolutely.
And here's a fascinating piece of history. Many of us today have heard about the terrible flu pandemic of 1918 and 1919 that killed more than 50 million people worldwide. But not many people know that it also helped to catalyze a massive gardening movement. People all over the world started growing food wherever they could, on rooftops, in fire escapes, empty lots, schools, and backyards. And these gardens persisted right through the Great Depression and right through World War II. And at one point, there were 20 million backyard and school and community gardens in the United States, and they were providing more than 40% of the vegetables eaten in the entire country.
Oh, that's terrific. And now, as we face a new pandemic, it is a great time to plant seeds if you can. In most places, springtime is a great time to start planting seeds, and gardening has been repeatedly shown to be a great stress reducer, and that's something we could all use right now, too. Plus, growing some of your own food can save you trips to the grocery store, which is a real benefit in times of physical distancing. I kind of want to be a cheerleader here for growing some of your own food if you possibly can. It can give you more self-reliance and food security. It can lower your grocery bill, get you cleaner and safer food, give you more exercise and time outdoors, and it can also contribute to a healthier planet all at the same time.
Well, if you're a cheerleader, I'm cheering along with you because this is so wonderful. But I also know that some people don't have access to places where they could grow food outdoors.
Yeah, it's so true. But there is an indoor option that's incredibly convenient and nutritious and easy. It's sprouts. You can sprout the seeds of vegetables, grains, and beans in your kitchen, and the actual sprouting process takes just a few days. It turns out that it dramatically increases the nutrient value of the seeds that you sprout.
Which is fabulous. A lot of people are cooking more today. Somebody told me recently that they had discovered a new restaurant that they hadn't known about before. It's called The Kitchen. And remarkably, they let you make your own food there and use your own ingredients, and it's open 24/7.
And you don't have to wear gloves.
I love that people are cooking more now and that they're becoming more confident in the kitchen.
Yes, hooray for cooking. Hooray for gardening. Hooray for sprouting. It's so true. You know, the surge in cooking might be one good thing that's coming out of all this. People who cook at home tend to eat healthier foods. So one thing that's happening here in this time of crisis is that a lot of people are reacquiring an ancient skill. More home cooking will lead to lower rates of obesity and of chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. In uncertain economic times, in fact, in any times, learning how to prepare healthy food is one of the most empowering skills you could ever acquire.
It really is. It certainly is.
You know, you and I have been talking a lot about some of the bigger issues at play with our health and COVID-19. A lot of experts are saying that this global pandemic and potentially other serious infectious plagues are a result of the way that we human beings are interacting with our planet and the animals who live here with us. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, that's a very important topic, and I want to spend a little bit of time on it. Well, part of it is the ways that a warming climate makes the world more hospitable to viruses and to pathogenic bacteria. But it's also about how we've been pushing into the very last wild spaces on Earth. When we burn and plow the Amazon rainforest so we can have cheap land to graze cattle or to grow cattle feed, or when wild animals in China are hunted to extinction, or when we intrude on wildlife habitats, what happens is human beings then come into very close contact with wild animal populations, and those animals are often under very severe stress from what we've done to them and what we're doing to their habitats. And then what happens is those animal populations can transmit new kinds of diseases, viruses and bacteria and other pathogens that we're just not ready for. Bats, in particular, have a knack for hosting pathogens that can infect people. The coronavirus that causes COVID-19 almost certainly originated in bats. But bats are not the only animal that can do that.
Most people just don't realize how many infectious diseases have been transmitted to humanity from animals. COVID-19 is really far from the first.
It is very far from the first. Tuberculosis was originally acquired from goats. Both smallpox and measles, among many other diseases in that family, are caused by viruses that mutated into their virulent form while living in cattle. from where they were then transmitted to people. We got whooping cough from pigs. We got typhoid fever from domesticated chickens. We got influenza from ducks. Leprosy may have come from water buffalo, and we got the cold virus from horses.
Wow, that's quite a list. So does how we treat animals play a part in all this?
It very much does. It really does. Many zoonotic diseases, which is what diseases are called that come to humans from animals, including the current coronavirus that is turning our world upside down right now, spill over into humans as a consequence of the ways in which we treat these animals. The live animal markets of China are a prime example.
What is it about these live animal markets that makes them so conducive to transmitting serious infectious diseases?
Well, you've got all kinds of animals who would never be near each other in the wild.
I warned you if you kept raising these
Terrified
animals
and being
in this
butchered
unhealthy
very
way.
close to the people who are purchasing them to eat. You've got crowded cages of animals packed very closely together. And there's a lot of contamination with the feces and the urine and the blood of different species all mixing together.
Sounds kind of horrendous. But what about it facilitates the infection of human beings?
Well, people, including the sellers and the buyers, the butchers and the consumers, are exposed in these markets to a flood of blood and excrement and other bodily fluids and parts. And once a single human is infected, then transmission from human to human is almost inevitable. These live animal markets are notorious for being places where terrible viruses can spill over into humans. Dr. Anthony Fauci recently said that it boggles his mind when we have so many diseases emanating out of these places that we don't just shut them down. COVID-19 is widely believed to have first passed to humans at a wild animal market in Wuhan, China.
Yes, that's true. And some people are therefore saying that this is really a Chinese problem.
Some people are saying that, but the truth is it could have happened in a lot of places. MERS, also known as Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, originated in the Middle East. It spread to humans from bats, with camels playing an intermediary role. Ebola began in Africa, probably from humans eating bats, but possibly from humans eating chimpanzees infected with the virus that had been living in bats. HIV/AIDS also began in Africa from eating a chimpanzee infected with a simian version of the disease.
It sounds like maybe we should stop eating bats and chimps.
Well, that would be a very good idea. That would be at least a start. But it doesn't go far enough. If we're serious, if we want to prevent further global pandemics, we have to change the way we treat animals. And that includes bats and chimps for sure, but it also includes cows and chickens and pigs and turkeys.
Okay, so now you're talking about the animals that Americans eat every day. Are you saying that yet another global pandemic could actually arise from the way that we produce meat in the United States?
I am saying exactly that. And I know that's frightening, and I know it seems like almost too much given what we're already dealing with today, but it is a fact.
I told you that.
The conditions that facilitate the emergence of new infections and new infectious diseases, animals being kept in extremely crowded and confined spaces,
Terrible.
are standard operating procedures in the modern factory farms that produce nearly all of our industrial meat and dairy products and eggs today. Increasingly, we have coronaviruses like porcine Delta coronavirus in pigs emerging and circulating among the animals confined in factory farms.
Does this increase the likelihood that strains with the potential to spark another global human pandemic could emerge?
Yes, and for many reasons. And one is that industrial meat producers today often mix antibiotics into every meal these animals eat. If you were trying for some demonic reason to create the conditions to breed bacteria that are resistant to our antibiotics, I don't know how you could find a better or create a better system. Now, the right use of antibiotics is to help people recover from bacterial infections. But the vast majority of all the antibiotics manufactured in the U.S. today are not used for that legitimate purpose. Incredibly, 80% of all our antibiotics are used instead by meat producers to keep animals alive and gaining weight in factory farms.
It's really disturbing, and it has serious consequence. Many experts are saying that due to the emergence of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, the human future could involve a return to the pre-antibiotic era. They're saying that we might see people dying in droves from infections that have been effectively treated since the discovery of penicillin and similar drugs.
Well, that is a very scary scenario to contemplate, but sadly, if we don't change our ways, that is the direction we're headed. If we continue to allow industrial meat producers to use antibiotics so freely, we will almost certainly return to a time when minor injuries and routine operations could be fatal. This is a very painful reality to consider. But if we don't ban the routine use of antibiotics in meat production, we are going to see diseases that we've grown used to being able to cure, once again, causing a lot of suffering and deaths.
Let's make this a little more tangible. What kind of diseases specifically are we talking about here?
Okay, before antibiotics, 90% of children who got bacterial meningitis, and many of them did, died. It's not fun to picture returning to those days, but we're already seeing the emergence of multi-drug resistant diseases like tuberculosis and gonorrhea. And thanks to penicillin and tetracycline, we've come to think of gonorrhea as easily treatable. Really nothing much to fear. But the bacteria that cause gonorrhea have already developed such high levels of resistance that there's now only one drug left that can reliably treat it. And even this antibiotic that's still working is becoming less and less effective. Syphilis is another example. It's today treated by a single injection with penicillin, but resistance to penicillin is developing. And the same thing's happening with the bacteria that cause diphtheria and the bacteria that cause typhoid fever. These are extremely serious diseases. People nowadays don't remember them, haven't seen them, and can not realize how serious, what high levels of fatality, and how miserable they make people. These are very serious diseases, and we've gotten used to being able to treat them successfully with antibiotics. But with nearly all of them, we're seeing resistance developing now to antibiotics and to multiple antibiotics.
It's an alarming thing to contemplate. And already right now, antibiotic-resistant bacteria are a huge problem. Now, I know we are in the midst of a pandemic already, and it might sound like a terrible time to think about how to stop the next pandemic. But I keep getting the feeling that we humans respond to pandemics as best we can, but we don't do all that we could do or should do to prevent them. We go to great measures to slow the spread of a pandemic disease after it emerges, and to develop treatments for those who become infected. But the closest we come to prevention is the effort to develop vaccines. And even this sort of prevention is really a kind of reaction. Real prevention means taking steps to minimize the chances of new pandemics emerging in the first place.
That is so true. That is so true. And when people wake up after undergoing a heart operation, they're often filled with gratitude.
Yeah.
They're eager to thank their doctors, the nurses, the other medical staff. Sometimes they want to make a donation to express how grateful they feel. But very few of us wake up in the morning and are filled with gratitude that we have clean water, that we don't have to fear cholera epidemics or typhoid fever, or that we don't have smallpox. We notice and we're rightfully grateful for heroic treatments that save some lives, but we tend to take for granted the public health and preventive measures that save far more lives. I'd like to see us take public health measures far more seriously and not wait for the next global pandemic to arise. Honestly, I'd love to see us have a Department of Public Health with its own cabinet secretary. And I'd also love to see us make truly healthful food available, affordable, and accessible to everyone.
Oh, I would too. But critics are going to say that would cost a lot of money.
And they'd be right. It will. But not nearly as much as it would save us in healthcare costs.
Yeah.
Just look at the trillions of dollars, the truly incalculable costs of COVID-19. When it comes to public health and excellent nutrition, it's not true that an ounce of prevention equals a pound of cure. An ounce of prevention is equal to more like a ton of cure.
Yeah. That's such a hopeful message, really, because the truth is that as bad as things are right now, that's also how much better they could become with a change. And I want to acknowledge that a lot of people are scared right now, and this is having a major impact on mental, emotional, and physical health. We're in tough times, and a lot of us are having a hard time focusing and being productive, and some of us are judging ourselves for that.
I know. That's very, very true. But there's a reason that so many of us feel so disengaged and so tired. And I haven't heard it discussed hardly at all.
What's that?
The author, Rebecca Solnit, has pointed out that when you're recovering from an illness, or when you're pregnant, or when you're young and going through a growth spurt, you're actually working all the time. Even when it appears that you aren't doing anything. Your body is growing and healing and transforming and laboring. And all of that takes a lot of energy, even if all that work is taking place below the threshold of consciousness. In the same way, today, we are each now compelled to do a lot of important inner work. We're struggling to come to terms with the new abnormal. We're trying to understand what this all means and what it will mean. We're trying to adjust somehow to the profound social and economic changes that are happening. We're working to understand the implications to our lives and our futures. And a lot of us are confronting our own mortality in ways we haven't before. And some of us are dealing with massive insecurity as the things we've depended on are taken from us. And we are all grieving, regardless of whether our grief has yet come to the surface or not. This is all profound, and it's all difficult inner work. It takes a lot of energy. It can be exhausting. If you're having a hard time focusing, if you're having a hard time being productive these days, there's a very good reason for that.
Yeah, it's true. It makes a lot of sense. It almost seems like we've got two pandemics going on at once. There's the global outbreak of this coronavirus, of course, and there's also another pandemic right alongside it, which makes it far more dangerous. And I'm talking about fear. Fear can spread as fast as any virus.
It sure can. And there's an explanation for why that reveals something about who we are as human beings. When we humans perceive a threat, the amygdala in our brains detect stimuli that are associated with danger. The amygdala then conveys to the rest of the body the message that there is a threat, and this in turn elicits a fight or flight reaction.
How does the amygdala know what is a threat and what isn't? What cues tell it that we're in real danger?
Those are great questions. We have evolved to watch other members of our species for cues about potential dangers. Picture a horse that senses danger and begins to run. When one horse runs, the others in the herd will almost always follow. We aren't horses, but we have also evolved to be exquisitely sensitive to the panic of others. We even have a specific brain region, the anterior cingulate cortex, that lights up when we sense fear in other people. This part of our brain immediately transfers this signal to the amygdala, which then triggers our own fight or flight reactions. The point is, we all look to others for how to respond in a crisis. We look to others for behavioral cues. And our ability to read other humans and to respond accordingly is one of our greatest assets as human beings. It allows societies to collaborate, to share ideas, to be empathic with one another, but it also makes us quite susceptible to the fears of others. As human beings, we rely on each other for many, many things. It's in our nature to do that. That's who we are. And sometimes this works to our benefit. But this is also why it's so easy for fear to spread rapidly through large groups of people. And today, With the overwhelming presence of social media and the 24-hour news cycle, our brains are literally being bombarded with fear triggers.
Yeah, they really are. Living in chronic fear is bad for our mental and physical health. So what are some of the best ways to get out of this cycle?
It helps to notice how you feel when you listen to or read certain news sources and when you're around certain people. It's obviously important to be informed, but it's also important not to be overwhelmed or destabilized. You can choose a few news sources that you deem to be reliable and credible and use them to stay informed and up to date. And you can limit the amount of time you spend on social media and be wary of exposing yourself to fear-based people and messages that breed social panic and hysteria.
There's a lot of fear going on in the human species right now, and there's so much we don't know that can breed anxiety, and a lot of what we do know can be frightening too.
Yes, that is very true. There's a lot of fear today, but you can use the fact that we are so profoundly attuned to each other's emotional responses to help those you love and to help those you engage with, if you can be as calm and centered as possible. Positive emotional contagion is also very real.
Yeah.
This is so important. When you're calm and steady and purposeful, you're helping others as well as yourself to find calm in the midst of crisis. And if enough of us can do that, if we can use this innate human response to bring people together in a community spirit, then we'll be more able to find solutions rather than to be torn apart out of fear.
You know, we really are social beings, right to the core. It's why there's an old saying that among friends, sorrows shared are cut in half, while joys shared are doubled. This global pandemic has created a lot of fear and stress and confusion, but I think it's also highlighted how interwoven we are with each other, and in some ways even the deep love that we all share.
I think it is. I think it is doing that. We're learning something today during this global pandemic that maybe we should have learned a long time ago about global interdependence. Today, it really is the truth that a health problem anywhere in the world can quickly become a health problem everywhere in the world. To a pathogenic microbe, it truly is one world. And as a species, we humans share a common vulnerability to infectious diseases. The microbe that killed somebody on a distant continent yesterday can reach us wherever we are today and seed a global pandemic tomorrow. To my eyes, the moral to this story is that we cannot any longer be indifferent to the suffering of others. I remember something that Martin Luther King said. He said, "We will either learn to live together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools." Now, he was, of course, speaking as a human rights leader and activist, but he literally could have been speaking as a modern immunologist.
Yeah, he really could have been. Do you think it's possible that we might learn something from all this that could serve us in the future?
I don't know, and I'm hesitant to talk about silver linings to this pandemic because there are so many people suffering so greatly. But I am seeing some incredible things already. Just to give one small example, about a week ago in Pennsylvania, 43 men finally went home. For a month, each of these men had been working more than 12 hours every single day, around the clock, and not one of them had left the factory. They had eaten and slept and worked in the factory. Why? In order to produce tens of millions of pounds of the materials that are needed for the face masks and the other personal protective equipment that is so badly needed today by doctors and nurses and other hospital workers. Now, nobody had told these workers they had to do this. They had all volunteered in order to help to protect the courageous healthcare workers who are at this very moment risking their lives as they provide care for and sometimes save the lives of the huge numbers of people who've become seriously ill with this coronavirus. My hat is off to, my heart is inspired by these workers.
Yeah.
And my heart is also inspired by every one of us who is working in whatever capacity to help get us through this in a way that not only retains our humanity, but actually expands our humanity and deepens it. My hope is that this pandemic will somehow help more and more of us to see that we really do need each other and that none of us can be truly safe when others of us don't have our basic needs met.
Yes, I hope for that too. You know, this coronavirus has sometimes been called an equalizer because it sickens and kills both rich and poor. But many poor people and many of those who've lost jobs and businesses that they thought were secure are now finding themselves unsure where their next meal might come from. Around the world, food banks are struggling desperately to respond to sudden droves of hungry people in dire need of food. In a lot of cities, the number of people waiting for many hours in extremely long lines in hopes of getting food has doubled or tripled in just the last few weeks. As more and more people find themselves relying on these organizations, the people who are running these programs are facing the pandemic too. Food banks are typically dependent on volunteers, and a lot of volunteer shifts have been canceled because much of the labor that food banks rely on comes from retirees and from senior citizens. As if that weren't enough, hunger relief organizations and food banks are reporting a huge decrease in donations, right at the very time when their work is needed the most.
This is true, and it's so very sad. And I'm sure that some of our participants right now are wondering if there's anything they can do.
You know, it depends on where you are in the world. In the United States, an organization called Feeding America is the nation's largest domestic hunger relief organization. It's been getting nourishing food to people in need for decades. Recently, Feeding America launched a COVID-19 response fund. It's a national food and fundraising effort to help support people who are facing hunger and the food banks that they depend on.
One of the things that I particularly appreciate about Feeding America is how hard they work to ease the burdens that are borne disproportionately by communities of color and low-income people.
Yeah.
This is a moment in history that's profoundly illuminating something that's been true all along, but is now becoming far more apparent. We are all affected when any of us lack the protections of a safety net. By focusing on the needs of the people who are most vulnerable, we can help to ensure the health and safety of all communities.
Every time anybody purchases an empowerment package for this summit, Food Revolution Network donates a portion of the proceeds to Trees for the Future to fund the planting of an organic fruit or nut tree in a low-income community. And we're also donating now to Feeding America, which you can do too, by the way, by going to the organization's website. If that's feedingamerica.org. Again, feedingamerica.org.
And of course, there are a great many other worthy organizations to consider supporting too, all around the world.
Yes.
I love that celebrities like Stephen Colbert are contributing a lot to and actively endorsing Feeding America. But what's most important, I think, is that those of us who have enough of anything, be it love, be it health knowledge, be it food, be it money, look to see how we can support those who don't.
Yeah, I so agree with that. This is a challenging time, and yet even now, even with all the fear and all the loss, we still have some choices that are ours to make. And I believe that we all have within our DNA, within ourselves, the capacity to respond with courage and with resiliency to all sorts of different challenges. You know, our ancestors proved that. They went through times and hardships that we in the modern world can hardly even imagine. And I declare that we too have the capacity to respond with love and conviction, and that is what we're here to do. In tough times, I often remember the words of Mr. Rogers, who said, when things get scary, he said, look for the helpers. You'll always find people who are helping. So I want to take this moment now to thank all the people who are helping, from healthcare workers to people who are donating money to feed the hungry, from young people who are doing the shopping so elderly people can be safe, to elders who are babysitting grandkids over Zoom. I want to give thanks for the people who wear masks to prevent the possible spread of disease to others, and to everyone who's simply staying home to help slow the pandemic down. The truth is that every time you take action to protect your health, you're helping in that way too. You're helping to flatten the curve. You're helping to reduce the strain on our hospitals and our healthcare system. And you're creating the conditions so that you are better able to be a resource and a support in the lives of the people that you love.
So true. So very, very true. You're becoming somebody who gives from a glass that's full rather than one that's empty.
Yeah.
You have more energy, you have more health, you have more vitality, you have more clarity, you have more calm, more courage in facing what we're all facing, really. And I want to say something now to everyone who's listening. I offer you my heartfelt thanks for doing the serious work of being a human being in these challenging times, and for bringing as much grace and compassion for yourself and for others as you can. It's a privilege for me to stand alongside you and to be along with you, part of our collective quest to find meaning and inspiration during this pandemic. I want you to know that you are, and each of us is, far more powerful than we've been taught and far more powerful than we've been led to believe that we are. Even in the midst of so much fear and pain, we can still find ways to express the best parts of what it means to be human. Even in the thick of so much crisis, we can follow a path made out of purpose and passion, commitment and compassion, discipline and joy, detachment and surrender.
Yes. And especially in this time of so much physical distancing, I want to remind you that you're not alone. Humanity is in some ways more unified right now than it's ever been. The entire human race, every country on Earth, is impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And the vast, vast majority of us are trying to respond to challenging times as best we can and to take care of ourselves and of each other. There are more than 300,000 people who are part of this summit. Participation has been higher than any food summit in history. If ever you feel like an oddball or a lone voice in the wilderness, I want to invite you to feel and imagine that for a moment. 300,000 food revolutionaries. Right now, you are part of a global uprising of people who are helping to reverse the chronic disease nightmare that's become the norm in the industrialized world. You are part of a surging movement of people who are voting every day with their food choices, with their life choices, with their dollars for greater health, for greater self-reliance, and for a healthier planet. More and more people are learning to cook, planting gardens, donating to help feed people who are hungry, and learning how to make food the foundation of health. Maybe, just maybe, some of us will emerge on the other side of this pandemic as stronger, healthier, and more aware people. Maybe we will learn something now about who we are and what we're capable of. A great deal of suffering and loss is present, and more is inevitable, but so too is love. So too is hope. And I believe that the love and the hope we bring to a moment such as this matters now, and it also helps to shape the future we will create together.
Yes, yes, yes. I believe that too. And now I would like to close with a prayer. It's a prayer that I've used to end all 10 of my books and every Food Revolution Summit we've held so far. It's a simple prayer, and it lives very deeply in my heart. May all be fed. May all be healed. May all be loved.
May all be fed. May all be healed. May all be loved. This is Ocean Robbins and John Robbins and the entire team of Food Revolution Network, thanking you so much for joining us in this summit and for all the ways that you participate in standing for healthy food, healthy people, and a healthy world.